resident concerns, noting that any comments on ARPA funding we'll take at the ARPA hearing, which will start about 8 o'clock, maybe a little after. So any resident concerns?
Yeah, I'm very interested in...
Could you tell me who you are and where you live?
It's a pretty important cultural topic, and I don't know why it was so late and, those things. I mean, some of us have to get up before 5 o'clock, and if it's going to come up at 10 p.m. or something, that's pretty late for us to wait just to say something for 2 minutes. So I don't know if I can say my piece now, or should I wait?
Sure, please go ahead. Normally we would take it at the time, but...
Pardon me?
Normally we would take the comment at the time, but if you have a problem waiting to the end of the agenda, please...
Yeah, if it was Article 1 or 2 or 3, I could have stayed, but this is really late. Thank you.
Please go ahead.
So I want to express my strong opposition to rename Columbus Day. Firstly, and very important, there is currently a United Nations Indigenous Peoples Day on August 9. Can you explain why we cannot celebrate that day? A quick search on the history of Columbus Day shows that it is celebrated all over the Americas, in the Caribbean, and in Spain, but its transition to a federal holiday is only due to the lynchings of 11 Italian immigrants, a group that, along with the Irish, Poles, Greeks, etc., also suffered enormous discrimination a century ago. Why tear down this holiday, causing unnecessary grievance in the Italian community, when August 9 is already there for the taking? Parts of the resolution that I read are utter nonsense and indeed false history, and extremely selective at that. The disparate outcomes of Native Americans that you've alleged today cannot be blamed on the tyranny of Columbus. It doesn't even pass a simple logic test. Many other groups have been brutalized through the centuries, not to mention the brutality of Native American tribes with each other. And I've read books, so it's not like they're the good guys and the Italians were the bad guys as such. It's too simplistic. But this is really less about Native Americans than another brick in the effort to demonize America as an evil, racist society, with destruction of its capitalist system and related freedoms being the ultimate goal. The diversity racket, 1619 Project, critical race theory, these are all additional bricks in this massive assault on our freedoms and on our self-image. I don't know what the ultimate goal is, but I suspect this whole group with this racial justice and all that, I suspect it's some homegrown version of a Marxist society where there is no history but only a future. There's only a utopia just around the corner if only we could let you control our lives completely. We need to stop this insanity. Use August 9 as Indigenous Peoples Day and return Columbus Day and retain Columbus Day as a celebration of the beginning of the greatest civilizational advance in history, which is why millions of people even today are at the southern border, not because we are an evil racist country. Finally, why vote on this? I don't know if you're going to take a vote on this today, but why vote, if you are, why vote on this in the select board meeting instead of putting it to a town-wide vote during our next election? This is a very important cultural topic that deserves more discussion. What you're doing is very divisive. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see that there are hands raised.
Hi, this is Tara from West Acton. I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Hello? Yes, I'm not sure what the person before was talking about. But was it Indigenous Day, Indigenous Peoples Day? Because if it is, and you're not going to let people speak, then I'd like to speak now. I really wasn't following what he was saying.
No, he said he couldn't stay till the end of the meeting, but I would allow you to comment on that now or later, if you'd like.
Okay. I'm happy to comment on that later. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And is there anyone else? Okay, we'll move on. Next thing is, I don't have any updates this evening. Mr. Manager, your updates.
Just that there's a hazardous waste day this week, so folks, check that out Wednesday night. Thanks. Wednesday afternoon.
Does any member want to have a member minute? Okay.
Yes. Sorry, one thing.
Please go ahead, Jim.
This coming Saturday is West Acton Oktoberfest. I'm really glad it's coming back. I mention it because the Commission on Disabilities, of which I am the liaison, has volunteers to bring back the puppet show they used to do. I don't know if you've any seen the Kids on the Block puppets, but they represent kids with different kinds of disabilities and differences, and they have, helpful dialogue, and it should be a lot of fun. So that'll be at Oktoberfest as part of the vast array of entertainment that they'll be there on Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you. We're still a little short of our 7:10 hearing, so I will take the consent items now. I'll note that for item 13, Mr. Fochman's name is not correctly spelled. It's Fochtman. So I'll read through these, and if any member would like to hold one, please say hold. 11, approve minor amendment site plan special permit number 7/26/00-372 145 Great Road, Boston Market.
I'll hold that one.
Okay. We may come back to that later, Jim.
Yeah, that's fine.
Depending on when the schedule is here. 12, request for use of town sidewalks, Acton Boxborough United Way, September 25th to October 2nd, 2021 for Chalk the Walk for Racial Justice. 13, committee appointment, Leo Fochman with corrected spelling, associate to full member, Board of Assessors, term to expire 6/30/2023. Number 14, request for hybrid meetings, Finance Committee. Number 15, accept grant of easement, 243 Main Street. Number 16, approve cemetery division rate schedule. And number 17, refund request, cemetery division for $450 from lot sale return. And so I would take a motion to approve consent items 12 through 17 inclusive.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor of approving consent items 12 through 17 inclusive, say aye.
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 Any opposed? It passes unanimously. We are still very slightly short of 7:10. Jim, is your issue with number 11 short?
It was just a couple of questions. If Kristen is on the call, I would ask her, or maybe John would know.
Yeah, I'll try, and then I'll go to help if I need it.
Okay. Phone a friend is always available here. So the agenda item says Boston Market on it, but the paperwork has to do with the former Pier 1 site, which I don't think is going to be a Boston Market, but I was confused. I just wanted to get some clarification in case people saw that. And maybe there's another application for Boston Market that's making its way through the pipeline.
So Boston Market is intending to lease a portion of what used to be Pier 1.
Oh, great, okay. So the dock and loading section that's mentioned there, that's going to be part of Boston Market?
Yeah, it's meant to support this new use of the space.
Great, that's very exciting to hear. The other question I had was, I noticed in the packet that there was a letter from the fire department with a variety of requirements. And I didn't see those written into the draft decision. And so I guess I wanted to know at what point in the process are those requirements or requests from the fire department enforced?
Thank you. The planning director, Kristen Guichard, I believe, is in the Zoom. Kristen, could you help us out with this question?
Sure. So I think the draft decision was released and posted online before we received those comments. So the board, if they wanted to, could include those, or it could be part of the permitting process during the normal review that the fire chief does for building permits. So if you wanted to condition it, if that made you feel more comfortable, we could do that, or you just run its course through its normal, review for building permits. So it's really up to the board.
Well, personally, I'm okay either way. Is a normal part of the process where this is done. If it's normally done later on, that's fine with me. I'm sure the fire chief isn't going to forget. Thanks.
So, Jim, are you okay to go ahead with the original consent item?
Sure. I will move that we approve minor amendment site plan special permit number 7/26/00-372 145 Great Road, Boston Market.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of approving the minor amendment to the site plan special permit, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Okay, we can now open our public hearing. I do not have, and my computer is still downloading the whole thing, the wording for the opening the public hearing, which I should have mentioned before the meeting, but I didn't.
Okay, we will find that immediately. Do you have it?
Yes, that's it. I'll read it. The Acton Select Board will hold a public hearing on September 20th, 2021 at 7:10 p.m. in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room, 204 at the Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, and virtually at actonma.gov/meeting/BOS on the application of John Perkins for a site plan special permit and the use special permit under zoning bylaw section 3.3.4, 10.4 and 10.3.5 at 9 School Street. Application materials and how to participate remotely are available online at Acton Town Hall and at doc.actonma.gov/views/collection-13912. Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Manager.
So for this application, we have a representative from the applicant here with us. Molly?
Hi, yes. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. For the record, my name is Molly Ubendorf. I work with Stamsky McNary. I will be representing the applicant, John Perkins, for the site plan special permit at 9 School Street. This is, share my screen. I'll just pull up the plan. So we submitted a site plan special permit in order to permit a 6-unit residential building at 9 School Street. The driveway comes in on the side and all the parking is in the back. This has undergone a very rigorous review by HDC already. We've gone before Natural Resources in order to obtain what was an amended order of conditions. And a little background on the project was originally we had submitted a plan showing 3 separate 2-unit, 2-family dwellings. So it was 3 buildings with each with 2 units. And ultimately HDC wanted to have 1 large building on the property, which is actually why we're before the select board tonight with this proposed plan. We're providing stormwater management for the property. The current property is degraded in a sense that it's dirt and gravel. So the proposed work at this site will improve over the existing conditions at the site. And, you know, it is being peer reviewed. We did just receive a letter from the peer reviewer today. You know, all of the comments from both the peer reviewer as well as town departments are all addressable. So there will be, you know, a revised plan in response to all those comments down the road. But we wanted to come before the select board tonight to see if they have any questions or comments regarding the plan. And we are happy to answer them.
Thank you. So I'll take initial questions from the board, and then we'll get questions from the public, and then finally we'll discuss how to proceed. Dean.
Thank you. Yeah, this was one of the projects assigned to me, so I've been following it fairly closely. And it has indeed gone through a very rigorous review process because it's sort of the centerpiece of South Acton Village, and it is controlled by the Historic District Commission. Lots of iterations on what should be done, what shouldn't be done. The bottom line is that the memo from the HDC, which is in your packet, approves it and recommends the project. So that carries a lot of weight, in my opinion. Also, the applicant did appear before the Design Review Board. I was in attendance at that meeting. There was some minor back and forth, some suggestions about work in the garage area at the rear of the building. But the bottom line, once again, is Design Review Board has put in their memo that they recommend it. And finally, reading the draft recommendation from the Planning Department, they also recommend it. And we feel that it fulfills all the mandatory findings, which in the appropriate time I'll read those off. But I think it's certainly a great improvement to South Acton. Also, I note that the sewer betterment units were something that was decided on actually a little over a year ago, so that hurdle has been jumped. So I think it's a nice project and a nice improvement.
Thank you. Jim?
I had a question for staff. So we did get the peer review memo today. It's quite long. There's a lot of items there. So I wanted to understand the state of your review of all those items. And yeah, I guess I would start there. Just understanding how much time you've had with them and how you've been able to compare them against the plans and the previous drafts, the previous draft agreement that you wrote.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you. Kristen, would you be able to provide comment on that question?
Sure. So we did receive it today. I was able to speak with Mike Carter. He's our point person over at GCG, the peer review engineer. We talked through the comments. They did not think that there was anything that was really a showstopper. There were some stormwater management, I think, aspects that just need to be addressed, but they didn't think that it couldn't be done. It just needs to be shown on the plan. There was one comment that they had made, I believe it was number, let me just pull it up. It had to do with showing movements for cars to make sure that they could move kind of underneath the deck, because the parking in this situation is basically going to be like podium parking. So they drive underneath the deck under the kind of as the ground level, because it's built into the elevation of the topography there. So he thought that it would be a good idea just to make sure that, you know, an SUV could move in and out between those spots. So I actually reached out to Molly to let her know. So I'm not sure if you plan to talk about that tonight, but those are really the two items that we discussed. The remaining items weren't things that they thought were problems. So that's where we stand at this point.
Thanks, Kristen. For my notes, I got the pattern issue, but I don't think I wrote down the previous issue clearly enough.
sorry, I muted again. Our piece was on page 2. Or sorry, I apologize, page 1. It's number 1. The project design should comply with the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook. So that's just something that needs to be shown on the plan. And I would let Molly speak to that, but the design review engineer didn't think that was going to be a problem, but it did need to be shown in the information provided.
Yeah, and we will, work with the peer reviewer to address all their comments. I've worked with them in the past on other things, and they're responsive. So we will be working with them to make this plan approvable to them.
Do you have other things, Jim?
Yeah, there was a memo from, I want to say, the Acton Water District that I wanted to understand. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, yeah, there it is. There's notes from Chris Allen, the district manager of the water district, that the development will require that the owner or owner's representative submit a water impact report. And it's an important piece of the process because, I mean, as you know, water supply, water quality, and water quantity are big issues in Acton. And I want to make sure we understand how that impact report will be written so that then, as I recall, the water district gets to figure out whether there are fees associated with connection to the system, and in particular mitigation fees. So I didn't know if either of you had comments on the status of the water impact report.
I will let John Perkins, who is the applicant, speak to that. Generally, that is in the purview of the architect and the developer.
We're not seeing John Perkins in the... Oh, there you go.
Can you come just to the table? Thank you.
Hello. I have spoken to,
And then telling the microphone who you are.
my name is John Perkins. I'm the applicant for 9 School Street, 6-unit building proposed. I did speak to someone at the water department. I can't remember who it was a while ago, and he said there was a fee involved to be part of the water, to be on the water, but he had not mentioned anything about a water report to me, but it's something we can certainly do.
Okay, thanks. I'll just want to make sure that that's reflected in the conditions, that the completion of that should happen before any building permit.
Any questions? Hemija.
Thank you. Definitely wanted to emphasize what Jim said. I think that seeing the water impact report will be helpful, and it is one of the Acton Water District's guidelines, so that'll be good to see. Just a quick question. So this is for 6 residential units. Any of them affordable or?
No.
Okay, got you. And then I guess my other question was related to environmental health. Has there been any assessments on kind of what this development could do in terms of having an impact on the environment, any critical environmental areas that are nearby? Has that assessment been done or planned on being done?
The only critical area that I can think of is the stream that was nearby, but I think Stamsky, Molly probably answer that one better than me.
Yeah. So there's a stream that's actually on the other side of the train tracks. And the original plan that was showing the 3 separate buildings went before the Conservation Commission. And they did ultimately approve that plan. And with this new plan, we did go before the commission again for an amended order of conditions, just reflecting the new building. And we did obtain that amended order of conditions. So we, with the stormwater management and all of the runoff that will be leaving the site will be treated. So it will have, no adverse impact on the downstream resource areas.
Thanks.
Thank you. Fran, did you have a question?
I have no questions, but I just wanted to say that wearing my HDC hat, sitting on the commission, I'm super aware of the project, fully in support of it. The developer and the architect worked with the HDC to, make sure that it was aesthetically pleasing, both in design and architectural materials. So I'm all for it.
Thank you. I just have one question. What is the natural gas being used for in the building?
For heat and stove, there are no fireplaces.
So if the building is air conditioned, why haven't you considered heat pumps and then not using natural gas?
That's just what I've always done is my projects is use natural gas for heat and water.
Yeah, but we're building something that's going to last 50 years, and we need to be not emitting carbon in less than that. I would like to see the building not use natural gas, and it should be straightforward to do in this environment. All you have to do is put in electric ranges and heat pumps instead of air conditioners. Right? It's very straightforward. It doesn't cost any more to run. It can be actually slightly less expensive to build. I would like to see that. We'll let that sit. We may not be approving tonight. We'll get the public hearing in and then decide where to go with the conditions or the outstanding items from the peer review at the end. I'll now open it up to comments from the public. If anybody has a comment for the public hearing, if you're in the room, please come to the microphone at the podium. If you're online, please raise your electronic hand. There's one hand up. If you're online and we're going to call on the first person here, but if anybody else wants to make a comment, please raise your hand now. Once we're out of hands, I'm not going to go back and reopen it. So if you want to speak, please get your hands up now. Thank you.
Hi, this is Sarah from Acton.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, I'm very concerned about this because the HDC was not able to review the back side of it. And with the train coming in, you look at the 4 High Street, it looks terrible. Oh, hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, yes. And so the DRB, from what I understand, couldn't review the back because the architectural plans were not provided in time. So I'm very concerned about this being like the gateway to South Acton on the train because we're trying to be walkable and trainable and, for the train rideable. And so I would like very much to, the HGC asked the developer to put roofs on the porch, and the developer refused on the back. So that they look like porches, not decks. And so I'm hoping that you all, this is a considerable difference between 4 units and 6 units. And so there's more money being made. And so I would like very much to, that you ask the developer to have roofs on the decks instead of just decks. So it doesn't look like, it's so trashy at the back. And so, because it's a lovely place, South Acton is. And so I hope that you ask for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments?
I would take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been made and seconded. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, public hearing is closed. Now we have to decide where to proceed from here. Mr. Manager, and normally at this point we would wait and reconvene after, or consider this this site plan special permit later after the peer review items were addressed and those things. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think each case is handled separately, but if that's something that the board wants us to implement, we certainly could.
Okay. Comments from other members? I mean, I would like to see, I mean, I read through the peer review document. I thought it was pretty extensive. I would like to see how the design resolves the various peer review items. There's a lot of them in there, as I remember, snow storage and other things. And I'd also like to see if the design can not include natural gas. I don't see this in this particular project. I just don't see that that's a problem, right? There are air conditioners on the outside of the building. They can just as easily be heat pumps. Any comments from Dean?
Yeah, I think I've not had a chance to look at the peer review report, so certainly if there's a lot of items there, they could be addressed, and we could probably vote on this at our next meeting. As far as the natural gas situation, I think at this point it's still the option of the developer. I think we'd all prefer to see electric infrastructure there, but I don't know there's any way to compel it at this point. Certainly I've got a number of air source heat pumps that take care of my house quite well, and they'd probably work fine here, but I think it's more the option of the developer rather than anything that we could dictate.
Well, we can not approve the site plan special permit, and he can build 4 units instead of 6. I might feel differently if there was a compelling reason here, and if Mr. Perkins wants to say what the compelling reason is, I'm happy to listen. But again, the design talks about where the air conditioner compressors are going to be, and there's no reason that they can't be heat pumps. If it was a building that was not air conditioned, maybe that would be a little bit different in my mind. But it is a building that's air conditioned. Jim, were you going to make a comment? I know you just turned on your microphone before, so I didn't.
Yes. I agree that sometimes in the past we have just said, planning department, make sure that the peer review comments are dealt with, and in other cases we said, let's make sure they're dealt with before we agree to the decision. Given that this just showed up today, I'd feel much more comfortable with waiting for a revised draft decision that included any of the relevant peer review comments and possible changes to plan. So there's that part. The thing about all-electric construction, I guess I'd say, we don't have authority yet to compel it. We did pass a bylaw at the last town meeting requiring that new construction be fossil fuel free. It was overwhelmingly passed at town meeting with a lot of arguments and information about why it was doable and why it was important. We are not allowed to enact that until the state legislature says, yes, you may do this. There are, at this point, 6 towns that have made similar requests to the state. There's a lot of momentum behind this. At this point, our main argument is just a moral one, that, reducing the use of natural gas now is our best chance to deal with climate change. It's even more powerful than reducing carbon dioxide over the next 5 years. And what we're learning about natural gas cooking is that bringing in a sometimes poisonous and sometimes explosive gas into people's homes is not a direction that's in favor of people's health. And part of our duty as the board is to look out for people's health. So, yeah, I would join David in requesting that you please look at that. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. And in addition to the things you said about the peer review, Jim, there's also the number of them. You know, the fact that we got it today in the list is quite extensive. And so I would like to see the design. John.
Thank you. I should have been more specific in my comments earlier, but if the board does want to consider new information that they're asking of the applicant, it probably shouldn't close the hearing yet. And so you could amend, you could change your decision to close the hearing and continue it to a date certain, probably the next meeting. So that's one option, if you're asking the applicant to do additional things or respond to additional things. Or you could simply condition those things in your decision tonight. Or
So-
when you make your decision, I guess I should say.
So I was under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that we could close the public hearing tonight, which maybe we could undo, meaning we were done taking public comments, but we don't have to approve tonight.
You don't have to approve tonight, but if you're going to be asking for new information and considering new information, you should do that in a public hearing.
Right, okay. I'll come back to that. Maybe we can continue the hearing instead. Himija, please.
Yeah, there we go. Just wanted to emphasize the importance of the water impact report, and so that for me would probably be the biggest decision maker here, just because Acton right now has a lot of issues with making sure that we have enough water for our residents, and so, you know, it's important that the quality of our water and the quantity of our water is maintained, and so I think that, you know, for me, you know, it would be really important to see what the water burden on this would be before making any decisions. So that would be the deal breaker for me.
Thank you. Fran, did you have anything else?
No.
So, Mr. Manager, is it then kosher for us to say that we continue this, the public hearing? And then we would need a time, right? And we would need to know what was on the schedule for October 4th or October 18th.
Yeah, unfortunately, Lisa's not here tonight. Kristen may know. Actually, she may be able to help better answer and explain what I'm trying to explain too. Kristen, are you still there?
I'm here, hi.
Thanks.
So in terms of continuing the public hearing or to reopen the public hearing, so John, I think you said it well. You know, if you can absolutely say, you know, we're done with receiving public comment, but in order to entertain new information, the public hearing should remain open. So if you wanted to, you know, receive updated plans and view them in public and discuss them, then, you know, you might want to reopen the public hearing. If you, like John said, were comfortable with conditioning all of the items as conditions of a decision, you could do that tonight as well. Or you could do that at a continued public hearing or a continued meeting, I apologize. And, you know, have a draft decision in front of you written by us to see what that would look like. So you could kind of go two different ways.
Kristen, are there public hearings already on the 4th?
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that the only, I apologize if I went down
Good question. Yeah.
too far there. So let me take a quick look. I don't believe we do right now.
Yeah, there doesn't appear to be anything posted.
Okay, Fran, go ahead.
Since the public hearing is open again, I just wanted to make a clarification, and if I may.
Well, you can make a comment in any case.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
Citizen concern about the back of the building, and although that was talked about extensively at the HDC, it was never really about design, it was about materials. And I don't ever recall there being the proposition of a covered porch, but I would completely encourage you know, reaching out to the HDC chair, David Hahn, for clarification. The only thing we discussed at length was the location of the HVAC on the roof. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
So would continuing this public hearing to October 4th or October 18th work for you, Mr. Perkins, or?
Please, the 4th. I'd appreciate it.
So I would take a motion to leave the public hearing open and continue it till October 4th at 7:40. Jim, please.
I was just wondering before I made that motion, do we need anything formal to undo the motion by Dean and seconded by Hemaja to close the hearing?
So in what I just said, I said leave the public hearing open and continue it until,
Okay.
if that is sufficient.
You should probably rescind or counter that vote somehow.
Okay, maybe we need two separate votes just for
Or just change it to reopen.
Okay, so I would take a motion to reopen the public hearing and continue it until October 4th at 7:40.
I'd be happy to make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I think you need to rescind your previous motion first.
So we, in this motion, said that we would reopen the public hearing.
Closed, reopened. A fine sequence. It's a fine sequence. We have closed it, and then we have reopened it.
Rescind the motion. The one you took to close the hearing, rescind it.
We could do it that way. We've chosen instead to do it by reopening the hearing. So it actually the hearing has been closed for the last 10 minutes. That vote still stood, and then we reopened it.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you.
Is that it?
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Have a good night.
See you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, the next item is the Main and Prospect intersection redesign. I see Chin Pang is with us. Are you making a presentation, Chin?
Yes, our town engineer is here to give us information, and we also have some people from the design team here.
Hi, good evening. This is Joya Pang, the town engineer. So we actually have Rosie here from 2 Design who's going to make the presentation. So just a little update that this is a sort of a continuation of the Main Street and Prospect Street intersection redesign from last set of reviews, comments that we received. So Rosie here is going to talk about the design, addressing some of the comments that we received from last time. And also I want to address that I think last set of comments we received, they were asking us to look into the complete street design for the whole Prospect Street, which we have started working with Tool Design on that as well. But tonight's presentation is going to be focusing on the intersection of Main Street and Prospect Street. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Rosie Jaswell with Tool Design, helping out on the intersection improvements at Main and Prospect Street. So I'll share my screen. Right, is that visible?
Yes, thank you.
Great. All right, so just a brief history of kind of what has occurred to date. So this intersection had a history of crashes and kind of operational and geometric challenges that we were looking to address through complete streets improvements to improve the access and safety for all roadway users. There was a public forum in December 2018, which presented 4 conceptual alternatives, including a signalized alternative and a roundabout alternative. And it was decided to move forward with the unsignalized alternative at that at that meeting. Then we followed it up in November 2020 with the proposed configuration for public comment, and there were some concerns raised about the access and operations of the proposed concept. So we went back and looked to address some of those concerns, looked at a few different options, which we'll go through here today, and as well as the evaluation metrics that were applied to them. So just as a reminder, the existing configuration of Prospect Street and Main Street has quite a large area where the two streets come together, where there is a little bit of confusion for which vehicle movements should be occurring and how, as well as a very long pedestrian crossing along Main Street, which exposes pedestrians and cyclists to potential vehicle conflicts over that entire length. So looking to address some of the safety and operational considerations, as well as reducing that exposure for the active modes users. So this was the previous concept that was presented. So it looked to try to simplify some of the movements. It ended up restricting a few of the movements as well. So the continual kind of movement northbound along Prospect Street was restricted, such that drivers would need to kind of exit onto Main Street and then turn back onto Prospect Street in this scenario. As well, there was quite a few different kind of pedestrian crossing locations and points, and not quite as continuous of a path for those users. So we looked at concepts that kind of allowed for Prospect Street to remain continuous. The first concept we looked at kind of closing that more southern access and concentrating all of the movements at the more north access location. So this would potentially cause some congestion at this location just for those wanting to turn onto this leg of Prospect Street. The queue kind of waiting to turn out onto Main Street might end up blocking that intersection unless vehicles or drivers kind of knew to keep that gap open. So there's just a lot of kind of movements being concentrated in this smaller location here. The second alternative we looked at was to close the main intersection, the northern intersection, excuse me, entirely, and have all the movements occur at the more south intersection that exists today. This one had a few kind of operational concerns just because vehicles turning off of Main Street and wanting to kind of turn left to continue on to Prospect Street, that movement, because there's not a lot of space between the two intersections, would need to kind of more or less be free flow, which would mean that the Prospect Street movements would need to be stop controlled. And that's kind of counter to general operations at intersections where the kind of main road is usually free flow, and the turn from the minor street would be the stop control. So this kind of flips those operations. We also looked at the potential to eliminate access altogether at this intersection, which does kind of eliminate some of those conflicts for bicycles and pedestrians along Main Street. However, all of the turning traffic would need to find other routes to access Main Street if that was their ultimate destination. And so it may just kind of be pushing the issue to other locations rather than addressing it fully. The last concept we looked at is to split up the movements. So all of the movements onto Main Street would occur at the south intersection, and all of the movements onto Prospect Street from Main Street would occur at the more northern intersection. So this still allows us to kind of reduce that crossing distance for pedestrians and cyclists, and it kind of reduces the amount of vehicles that are kind of turning across the through traffic along Prospect Street. So we took a kind of closer look at comparing these options to try and get an understanding of what might be kind of the most preferred alternative. So we looked at several different evaluation criteria, including kind of that pedestrian and bicycle conflict points and exposure, trying to reduce kind of the overall crossing distances with our modifications. Also looked at kind of the level of access modification. Are we restricting movements that are allowed today? Are we kind of producing kind of undue burden for vehicles that are looking to continue on to the path that they do today? As well, just general traffic operations. Is there kind of potential for driver confusion, interrupting the traffic flow? Are there queuing concerns, as well as kind of safety improvements, speeds, conflict points? We also kind of looked at the potential to add a little bit of green space by kind of reducing the overall footprint of these intersections. And then again, kind of making sure that whatever design we move forward with is intuitive for drivers that are coming across this intersection, either those that kind of drive it every day or those who may be new to the area. Just want to make sure it's obvious of where they should be and where they should be moving and who has the right of way. So we did compare to the existing configuration as well as the previous concept. We wanted to make sure that any concept that was moved forward from this point was an improvement from the previous concept, as well as kind of addressed some of those concerns that we heard last time. So concept A and B did rank higher than the previous concept, but they did have kind of traffic operational issues and potential concerns that way. The eliminating the access did kind of score higher because it had potential to reduce a lot of those conflicts that we talked about. However, it did kind of eliminate that access to Main Street, which was cited as a concern as well. And like I said previously, could just be pushing the issue to a different intersection as some of that traffic needs to reroute. So the concept D, though it didn't have as much potential for green space, it did improve kind of the overall operations and maintained all of the access that we were looking for. So that based on the evaluation matrix, the recommended concept is the kind of split access one-way configuration, which kind of allows for reducing of the crossing distance and the conflict points while still maintaining access to Main Street as well as continuous access along Prospect Street. So this simplifies the operations and kind of allows for more kind of storage space. So people that are waiting to turn onto Main Street still have space to do that waiting without being disruptive for the traffic on Prospect Street. Well, thank you. That is the presentation.
Thank you. I really.
You're going back and relooking at this design. I really like the concept D design. It satisfies all the concerns of that we had with the previous, at least I had with the previous design, and I really appreciate that. I do have a few questions and comments. The first question is, does this design have no stop signs on Prospect Street?
Yes, that would be the intention for there not to be stop signs, but they would need to be yielding for the crosswalk.
Of course, yes. Okay, great. Second thing is
those dark lines that are crossing Main Street. I assume that's where the crosswalk is on Main Street. Do you happen to know where that is in relation to the entrance to the Great Hill Conservation Land? I ask that because I live in South Acton, and I noticed that many people cross Main Street to go for a walk in the conservation land, people who live in neighborhoods off of Prospect Street. And I want to make sure that they, a pedestrian, once they get across the street, can navigate to the conservation land, possibly by locating the crosswalk across from the conservation land, or making sure that there is room on the other side of the street for them to reach the conservation land. So, you don't have to completely answer the question now, but I would ask that that be considered in the design. And
I believe that this crosswalk is at that conservation access.
okay, if it is, that's fine. It looks a little bit north of that to me, but, you know, I can't be absolutely sure. So, but anyway, please consider that when locating that crosswalk. And the second thing that I just wanted to mention is that almost all of the southbound traffic on Prospect Street that is going to go on to Main Street is going to turn right on Main Street. And almost all of the northbound traffic on Prospect Street that's going to get onto Main Street is going to turn left on Main Street. Right? So that's fine. Every once in a while, especially like when a train releases when we're not in a pandemic, there are a number of cars coming up Prospect Street and turning left onto Main Street. I just want to make sure that there is enough room between the left and right-hand turn lanes for people to navigate across each other. I mean, I think this is a very good design, and I think there's no way in any design of avoiding the fact that those people are going to cross there. But I just wanted to point out that, you know, or if said the other way, almost nobody going north on Prospect Street is going to go south on Main Street. And almost nobody going south on Main Street is going to go, south on Prospect Street is going to go north on Main Street. So almost everybody, that when they're going from Prospect to Main, is going to cross there. So again, just please consider that and make sure that there's room there for the people to cross. Thank you. Other members of the boards have questions or comments? Dean?
Yeah, it's just speculation on my part, but I suspect that this design would be amenable if at some later point we decide we need to put a traffic signal there. Would probably be pretty simple to put one right there to handle the turning traffic out of Prospect Street onto Main Street. Some of the other designs that we talked about several years ago would have required multiple mast arms, whereas I think this one could be done fairly simply, which I think is a good point of this design. It could be modified and developed further if traffic becomes a continuing problem out there.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? Himija?
Hi, yes. So I guess my first question is a clarification question. What does, so it's the second slide, third bullet. It said that in December 2017, we opted for an unsignalized alternative. Just wanted to ask anyone to clarify what that is.
I might be able to answer. The input from the board and others in town was that at that time, we didn't want a traffic signal there.
Okay, got you.
Right, so we just gave feedback to the designers that we would prefer the alternatives that didn't have a traffic signal.
Great, thank you. And then in terms of the assessment that you all did, I was wondering if there were any specific or special considerations for buses. That's a pretty busy street for a lot of school buses, so was wondering if that factored in at all.
Is this buses turning on and off of Main Street or continuing along Prospect?
Mostly Prospect, because I know at least the high school is a little bit up that street, and also a few elementary schools. So a lot of school buses will turn from Prospect Street to Main Street as part of their normal bus route.
Yeah, I think that will certainly come into play when we're kind of refining the design in the later stages of design, making sure that there's enough kind of space for those types of buses and vehicles to wait, as well as making sure that the kind of turning radii are large enough for that vehicle as well.
Great, thank you. Yes, that would be good. And then another question was, if you go back to the table that you had with the pie charts, these are a little nitpicky. I apologize. It's the science in me. But in terms of how that was quantified, I was wondering if you could explain that a little bit. And also, so for example, where the pie chart is half full, does that mean like there's no impact to traffic operations, or, you know, it's not as much, there's some benefit, but not as much? Would just kind of love to know a little bit more about the quantitative metrics that went into that. And also a related question, I actually also kind of agree. I do like concept D the best, but I was wondering in terms of green space, you know, what is the effect on that? Because that is approximately 25%, according to the pie chart.
Yeah, so part of this was, so it is kind of like a 0 to 4 scale. So it's kind of, if it has a score of 2, then there are some kind of safety improvements in this case, but also some safety drawbacks. So it kind of, there's different things kind of weighing on those scales in either direction. And also kind of a comparative against all of the options. So if concept C did a better job of concept B, then concept B would kind of score lower comparatively. So that was kind of what went into it. Sometimes it's different aspects that are getting a score on one of the concepts that the other one doesn't have, but it has other things that are kind of adding to those scoring metrics. So it is a bit of an art and a science in this case. So the green space added, this one was more just the total area that was available. So you can kind of see in the green, the area of the green in all of the concepts. Whereas some of them, because we were closing one access or the other, had a little bit more opportunity for green space to be added. Whereas this one, we added some green space, but less because both of the intersections were still kind of in operation in this concept. So kind of compared to the other ones, it's a little bit less, but probably not a full 25% less.
Got you. And then last question, sorry. In terms of traffic operations, can you explain the potential drawbacks with concept D since it's not a fully filled in pie chart?
Yeah, so I think some of that came up in some of the previous questions, but just it is still two pretty closely spaced intersections. So there's not as much storage. So it's probably one vehicle at a time can wait in this little space here before they kind of find a gap and move on to Main Street. So the vehicles that are still kind of queuing up need to do so on Prospect Street. But there is some potential that vehicles are kind of stack through this intersection and not allow kind of vehicles to continue on Prospect Street. So there are still some challenges. It's not a perfect solution.
Okay, thank you.
Also, just to be clear, that the green areas on these diagrams are, Jim.
I just wanted to confirm after looking at the map that indeed the crossing does go right. That is the conservation land parcel, very close to the entrance.
Thank you. Any other questions for the board?
I don't have a question, but I do like the pedestrian crossway in the new green space in this plan.
Good, yeah, that is nice. And it's nice that you can cross directly to the other side of Prospect. Other comments? Okay, I'll open it up first to any comments here in the room, and people online, if you raise your electronic hand so that I can call on you since we're done here in the room. Any comments here?
Okay. Mark, please go ahead with it. Oh, just a minute. I'm going to wait. Hold on, Ann, please. Just a minute. Go ahead. You go and call in.
Yes, this is Tara. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I have some questions and then comments. I got some emails after the last decision on this intersection complaining about the one-way thing. And so is this in response to complaints about that other design?
So in the last design,
It was not possible to go north on Prospect all the way through. You actually had to get onto Main Street, go, a couple hundred feet on Main Street, and then get back onto Prospect Street. So if you're...
Thank you. Yes, that's what people were complaining about, and I urged them to write to you guys, and I thought you'd be reasonable and get a new design. So if that's the case, then I'm so happy that government works. And let's see. So I want to also make sure I understood that. So the whole island will be green, right? So the new green is in green, and the white is green already. So the whole thing will be green. Is that right?
That's right.
Thank you. And I couldn't hear what Jim was saying about the trail access. Does that go right up to the trail? On D, the concept D?
He was saying that indeed, in response to my question earlier, that the crosswalk on Main Street,
the entrance to the Great Hill Conservation Land. So for people, from the neighborhood taking their dogs or just themselves there for a walk on Great Hill, it's easy to enter the conservation land.
That's great. I love that. I like all these designs, by the way. And let's see. And I like what Fran was saying about the crosswalk in the green. I like that. I wonder what the residents think. I wonder if you had spoken with the residents that were complaining about the old design. I'll take that answer offline, but I will want to say that I don't want more lights. Car use is going to be reducing, I believe, based on the analysis that I'm looking at. And I don't think that lights is a good, an investment in cars and passing cars and making it accommodating more cars and more speed. I love the fact that you're doing this without a light. And the more we do without lights, the more people will slow down naturally. Thank you so much.
thank you. So I don't know if anybody is from the neighborhood is here tonight, but I believe that this design addresses their concerns too. So they, in general, the people from the neighborhood like the last design, except for the fact that it didn't allow for continuous northbound traffic on Prospect Street. Ann, please.
I use this intersection all the time, every day. And when I get home tonight on this path, I will have to go here, and I'm not sure what happens here. Do I stop? Because right now, when I go here, I have to make sure that when I'm getting off Main Street, that the cars coming up Prospect Street have stopped before they go off. That's one thing.
Okay, hold on, wait, let's get an answer to that. I asked her earlier if there were any stop signs on Prospect itself, and she said no. But Ms. Jaswal, the person in the room here is asking if on the one-way from Main Street to Prospect Street, is there a stop sign on that little one-way as you enter Prospect Street?
Yes, that would be the intent, is for folks coming off of Main Street to stop and wait for a gap on Prospect Street before making the left, where it would kind of function more like a yield for those turning right.
Okay, thank you. And Ann, you had another question?
I would stop here.
Yes, she says you're going to
Plowed into by the next car that's coming off of Main Street.
Well, hopefully not. So this is at less of an angle than the previous intersection. So what?
Angle, and it's got new grass and all that sort of stuff. It looks great with all the grass. When we try to get out of our house, when I come to a meeting here at 7:30 on this coming week, I will not be able to make a left-hand turn onto Main Street because I'll be late. So I'll have to go all the way down, past the schools and out to make turn on Main Street. So what happens is, you come down here, and people are waiting to make a left-hand turn, or they're coming here to make a right-hand turn, there's going to be a queue, and you're not going to be able to get through. I think that this is looks like a really great plan for people who don't drive there. I think you need a light.
So I understand your point. I'll ask her about it in just a second. That traffic does queue there now sometimes. I don't think this is any worse than what it is now. But so the point.
I do it every day. She's all the time.
I know. I live right there too. Thank you. And I know I just said it queues at Prospect Street. I mean, I notice it especially when a train lets out. So, Ms. Jaswal, the person in the room is commenting that people heading northbound on Prospect, there are times during rush hour or other things where there's a lot of people doing that and wanting to turn north on Main Street, and she's concerned that the traffic queuing on Prospect to take a left on Main will, she's concerned about that queue and, that people will not be able to get by or get out. So I don't know if you had any comment on that.
Yeah, I think there's ways we can kind of, through design and striping, try and prevent people from blocking the intersection. However, the queuing, I think, is a reality that exists today, and we're trying to split up those turning movements as much as possible, to try and split up the queue to help it clear a little bit quicker. But it will be there in the future. It's just a matter of if we can kind of control how people are using the intersection a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think one of the distinct things about this design is
Setting Prospect Street in two places that are fairly close to each other, and they sometimes interfere with one another. So sometimes you'll have a person pulling out at the northbound, this is in the current intersection, in the northbound spot where they touch from Prospect onto Main, and then someone turning left from the other one in Main, and they come out at the same time, and they interfere with each other. Other comments from the public, please. Either in the room or online. Okay. Thank you very much. What do board members think? And Mr. Manager, do you want a vote here from us?
Yeah, this is a project that we've been working on for quite a while, and we think this is a concept that's been responsive to all the concerns that we've heard in multiple iterations, and we'd like to be able to move forward with the next phase of design, if you support doing so.
I agree that this satisfies our concerns from last time, and I would take a motion asking the town manager to move forward with concept D. So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so Dean moves and Himajah seconds. All in favor of moving forward with concept D, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Okay.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to comments from about the. Thank you, Chin and Ms. Jaswal, and thank you for your efforts. This is a really good design.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, we'll now take comments on the American Rescue Plan Act funding. If you'll remember from last time, our last meeting, the town manager presented a list of 43 priorities from the town for uses for this funding. There are those 43 include one request from the water district, a number of requests from the school district, and then a number from various departments in town. These total to almost twice as much money as we have to spend in the ARPA grants. So we also opened up a survey where you can give your comments. I would encourage you in both taking the survey and your remarks tonight to vote for, if you vote for too many things, you're not providing us with a lot of advice. So, because it's easy to go through this list and say, that's good, that's good, that's good. I don't think, bullet voting in the sense that only voting for one is necessary, but you probably want to vote for fewer than half. So before we get going with public comment, I'll ask the town manager to review where we are in the process.
Yes, thank you. This is the third night we've had a public meeting discussing this, so much of this information has already been covered in the previous two sessions, but I was going to just run through it very quickly because I believe there's new people in the audience. I want everyone to have the same understanding. So the American Rescue Plan was signed in March of this year. It provided substantial aid to cities and towns across the country and school districts across the country. We in Acton are getting funding from three sources. Middlesex County, since it's not a functioning county, we're getting a portion that would have gone to Middlesex County. We're getting a portion that goes directly to us, and our school district is getting a portion that goes directly to it. And we have 3 years to spend this money through the end of 2024. The total that we have from ARPA is 2.4 from our municipal calculations, 4.5 from the county. The school district they received about $900,000 directly through ESSER 3, and the total funding is $7.8 million. The amount of money that we're talking about tonight, though, is just the first two items, the 2.4 and the 4.5, which equals approximately $7 million that's available, and we're asking to develop a plan to spend the funding. So to develop the plan, we've done presentations. We issued a survey, which the chair just mentioned. We've issued public notices, email, social media. There's a listening session that just started, and we've invited folks to submit comments directly to the select board at sb@actonma.gov or fill out the survey, which can be found at actonma.gov/ARPA. This is the path that we're on, heading to October 18th, where we'll be asking the board to consider a recommended plan of investments for this $7 million of funding. And there are several ways that the funding may be used. It's not just for responding directly to COVID, although that's the sort of reason why this funding was created. So there's certainly a lot of that we've done, but it's also looking at ways to improve economic development issues, helping families and certain populations in need, and also replacing revenue that public sector industries lost in the last year. Infrastructure is a big investment point, providing equity-focused services. Certain things are not eligible. You can't use it you can't put it into stabilization and save it for a rainy day. You can't build roads and bridges unless for very specific reasons related to economic development. You can't do several other things. So we did some needs assessment work. We looked at our select board goals. We talked to many stakeholders. We looked at our capital improvement plan, and we developed, as the chair mentioned, several millions of dollars worth of projects. The 43 items are here listed in front of you. Most folks have seen them, but they're in the categories that I presented earlier, and they each cover several things. I probably won't go through each one like I did before. Does that work? But there's major investments related to each thing. There's several in each category. This is all available online at actonma.gov/ARPA to review the previous presentations. I wanted to get to the Finance Committee. We had a great discussion with the Finance Committee last week, and they asked some important questions that I thought would be helpful for the public to know the answers to. They asked which projects are new priorities resulting from the pandemic. Of the 43, I think most of them are either new or have a renewed focus because of the pandemic. Some are specific related to the pandemic, like vaccine administration and outdoor classrooms and things like that, but all the other ones are indirectly related to it. Another question was, which projects have ongoing costs after the 3 years are funded by ARPA? In the 43 projects, there are 2 that include hiring staff, and the idea with those 2 is that those would continue afterwards if supported in moving forward. The 2 positions I'm referring to are a social worker position and a grant and procurement person for the town offices. Another question they asked, which projects are related to select board goals, and they also asked which projects were already identified in the 10-year planning process that we just completed. So I thought those were really good questions. So almost all of the goals that the select board established last month are addressed in these 43 items. Very few actually weren't, and so I think we were being very responsive to what the chief policymakers for the town believe are important objectives for us to address. And then I tried to list it. Those numbers don't mean much to folks, but if you go to the back of the capital improvement plan, several of the projects listed in here are related to projects that we've already recommended in our 10-year plan, and investing in them now through ARPA funds would allow us to have more capacity in our investing in capital needs in the next 10 years. So that's the quick overview. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm looking forward to the listening part of this evening as well.
Thank you. I think you've listed, as you said, the items in your budget that you think will have a continuing budget impact where you hired 2 people. I don't think we've heard officially from the school district as to which of its projects also continue.
I did talk to the superintendent, and the projects requested in here from the school district would not have staffing impacts in the long term.
But it's not just staffing, right? Is it, for example, all-day K would have a continued budget impact, presumably?
Well, yeah, I guess it's specifically related to hiring staff with this money, I think, was the question that I was focusing on. So, yes.
Okay. We'll open up to public input. I just want to say that, at our next meeting and finally the meeting after that, we'll be taking all the input we hear from the public at this meeting via email, via the survey, input from the FinCom, input from the town manager and the school district, and also our own opinions, and factoring that all together and making a tentative decision on October 4th and a final decision on October 18th. So I will invite people to comment. Does anybody in the room want to make a comment?
John, I think it's a question for you.
Yes, just a second, please. Let Fran
Sorry,
ask.
I was curious when is the public comment period, what is the deadline for that?
So we've established a 1-month period from September 13th through October 13th as the public comment period.
Thanks.
But, the sooner the comments, the better. I mean, after October 4th, and we've, have a tentative list, we'll have to take things off the list from comments, if that makes sense. So, Kara, please go ahead.
Good evening, all. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Could you just say who you are and whether you're representing yourself or the school?
Hi, my name is Kara Wilson-Cook. I am the Vice Chair for Acton for the AB Regional School Committee, and I come in my official capacity this evening. It's my honor to serve the families and students of Acton Boxborough in my capacity as Acton's Vice Chair for the AB Regional School Committee this evening. I'm proud to say that we've successfully started a new school year of educating Acton's children during a public health crisis and global pandemic. We started with pivoting during the immediate crisis and shutdown. We endured a whole school year under a hybrid schedule and completely remote option. And now we are finding a sustainable path forward with all of our students fully returned. This school year comes with the additional pressure of a new variant and emerging variants, while half of our student population remains ineligible to receive the vaccine. I start with all of this context because it's important to reiterate. The Acton-Boxborough Regional School District has been educating our students for the entirety of the pandemic. We kept our school buildings open to our students for the entirety of the 2020-2021 school year, and we are now fully open with all 5,400 students back in our 9 buildings. The effort to make this possible has been Herculean. The resources required extraordinary. While providing safe, quality education to our students in our open buildings and online, we also serve the town in another way. Using our infrastructure and resources, we provided over 304,000 free meals to the community weekly for 19 months. We thank the Select Board, our town manager, and the incredible town staff for the helpful collaboration we've enjoyed in these efforts to keep educating our students during this tumultuous period. I'm standing, in hopefulness for further good work. The ARPA funding being allocated to our town is an important tool for the sustained efforts we're all making to function during this time. In order to maintain safe operation of our schools, we're asking for a portion of the funding to help us recuperate some of the resources spent to get us through the last school year and to perform additional and anticipated mitigation strategies throughout this current school year. We recognize that the town has its own efforts to fund and its own resources to recuperate. The items we've submitted to you for funding, representing a total sum of $2.6 million, represents only 37% of the ARPA pool, significantly less than the traditional budgetary split between us. The money we will fund projects we need done, will give us more room to make decisions that will assure the safety of our students, especially our vulnerable, unvaccinated elementary school students, and head off potential challenges as we move into the FY23 budget planning season. We humbly ask that you fund all of the items on our list so that we may continue to provide consistent, safe, high-quality education to all of our students in our open buildings for the remainder of this pandemic school year and beyond. Thank you again for the opportunity. We look forward to our continued collaboration.
Thank you. Other people in the room here, would anybody else in the room like to make a comment? I would ask that people queue up behind the podium so we don't have to wait between speakers, please.
Hi, my name is Dan Malloy. I've been an Acton resident for 25 plus years. I'm a member of the Economic Development Committee as well. And we are strongly advocating. We met last week and discussed this. We saw the whole list, and we really want to focus in on the support for this, the feasibility and engineering study for the Great Road Sewer Project. I think if you look at the economics of our town and the tax base of our town and our ability to attract businesses that can help slow the cost base for our residents, we're in a bit of a deficit situation. If you look at where we can try to compete for businesses, and there's a laundry list of businesses that have considered us, looked at us, and felt that we didn't have adequate infrastructure to be able to support them, that would have come to Acton and went to other communities. It's not the existing businesses along Great Road could reimagine themselves, and again, I believe a lot of this money was intended to support commercial businesses and the reengineering of our economic base among our businesses. They could benefit from this, and this has been an ongoing problem. It was reported in the study that was done recently with them about what they could do with sewers. But I also think it's limiting the art of the possible of what it would mean to attract businesses if we had a commercial district that actually was fully committed to sewers. So I think we should be funding, I think we should be considering it even broader than this, but right now there's a $400,000 line item in here for sewer feasibility along the Great Road corridor. I think we should double down on that as a town. We send communication to John saying there's another bucket of money he's trying to pursue to get input from the businesses and potential businesses, people that historically have rejected coming here or would consider coming here. We should be studying this with a goal of getting a shovel-ready product available within a 12-month period of time and be prepared when the federal infrastructure money starts to flow. We need to get our ducks in a row if we're going to compete for that money, and this is the time to do it. I look at this list, a lot of interesting things on this list. I consider infrastructure and being able to attract core businesses to this town that will bring jobs to this town, will bring educated workers to this town. We need to be able to build a better economic center where people will be attracted to. And this is a fundamental liability for the town that we don't have a commercial infrastructure with sewers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Martin and the rest of the board. Jason Cole, 63 Neshoba Road, and I am speaking solely on my own behalf. First, I would like to thank the Select Board for opening up a consideration of how to use these monies to the general public and for publishing the 43 projects that represent the initial wave of priorities. I do not envy you the task of correlating all the competing opinions and suggestions you'll receive, but that won't stop me from making some suggestions of my own. I see from the initial ask that there are just under $12 million worth of priorities, but only $7 million of possible spend. As you work to winnow down the final projects, I would like the board to take the following into consideration. The stated purpose of ARPA is to ameliorate the pain and shortfall created by the pandemic. Anything on this list that is a direct, immediate replacement for the harm done during the pandemic should be first priority. That is why $400,000 to fill the shortfall in local receipts last year seems like the easiest decision on the list to make. While using these funds to lessen the tax burden is not allowed, using them for projects the town and district were planning on doing when resources became available is a good way to use unexpected funds to have lasting, repeated returns on investments for the citizens for years to come. To that end, where possible, I urge you to fund items on the capital improvement plan that did not already have a clear source of revenue. God willing, the international travesty that precipitated this large federal program is a once-in-a-lifetime disaster. ARPA should be the very definition of one-time money. To that end, I would suggest that new initiatives should be in the very last rounds of decisions, indeed only if any monies remain after taking care of the first two priorities. I would ask you not to saddle taxpayers with new FTEs or any other initiative that is made easy by having money in hand now with the expectation of finding tax revenue later to continue these initiatives for the foreseeable future. Part and parcel of not having new initiatives is the if you build it, they will come mentality that I see in the Asa Parlin House, the 2 sewer expansions, and some of the green subsidies. I am not categorically ruling them out, but I am suggesting that they have ongoing costs. And just because it is cheap and easy to get started doesn't mean they are worth doing when full future costs are taken into account. Lastly, I would ask that the town and district carefully look at their lists and see where there might be some overlap or duplicative effort. And if there is, please identify which entity is best to deliver the greatest value and let that be in their swim lane. For example, would education of how town politics work best be handled by the town or by the education system? Similarly, if we're adding mental health services, would it not be better served to have the entity that is a superset of all citizens be driving that particular initiative? If not, how can we make sure there is not duplicate effort or an us versus them approach? I'm saddened by the national trauma that got us into this place, and I think we all can agree we'd gladly give this money back, not to have gone through the last year and a half of COVID. But given the positions we find ourselves in, I ask you to backfill first, invest in existing initiatives second, and only after all of those are done should you start looking at any new programs. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else here in the room? Going once? Okay, Mark, please.
Yes, Linda Vieira from North Acton, and I would like to ask a couple of questions about two big ticket items. P2 for the converting the historic Asa Parla House for $1 million, and also the constructing the sewer main, P9, constructing the sewer main extension to the Acton Housing Authority. And if you could explain how that's connected to the impacts of the pandemic, that would be really helpful. And I would like to add one thing to this that for consideration, that wouldn't be a big ticket item, but to increase community involvement in town government, specifically increasing people who vote in town elections by notifying everyone in town by a postcard or by email that there is a town election, so that we can increase voter turnout more than 10%, which is what it usually is. And that would be, I can justify that, connecting that to the pandemic, because the pandemic has made it a little harder to vote. So that would be a small ticket item, but I'd like to see that included. And I would focus a lot on P32 through P41, because those items seem to be the ones that have been most impacted by COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just get to your questions. I'll do the second question first.
To include in this package how that's related to the effect of the pandemic. I'm not saying that converting the Asa Parla House, I'm against that for a cultural center, but that something that is connected to the pandemic, and that this money should be spent on that project as opposed to getting money from some other source from the town.
Mr. Manager.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Great question. I think that when over the last year during the questions and comments and concerns from the community saying that we needed to find ways to connect, and that the pandemic and its impacts of isolating everyone made it even more clear that having some sort of gathering space other than normal boardrooms would really be a benefit to the community. And so that converting the existing dilapidated structure behind Town Hall in the middle of the historic Town Hall and Library complex would serve the need of bringing the community together. It would be an indoor-outdoor amenity, which would provide for space for people to interact outdoors, which has been a very important part of how we've responded to the pandemic and made services and opportunities available outside. So there's several reasons connecting it to this pandemic, but it's actually in the category for revenue replacement, which doesn't have the same amount of restrictive conditions on it. But I think hopefully that answers the bulk of your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Larry Knott. I'm the chair of the Economic Development Committee, and I'm going to be repeating slightly some items that one of the other speakers has already given to you. We met last Thursday evening, and we talked about two efforts we're involved with right now. One is the rapid recovery program that is in its final stages before the final report is submitted to the state. And we also went through the list of the 43 projects, focusing on the ones that we felt were most important. We decided that Project P11, the feasibility study for sewers along the Route 2A corridor, was the most important item from our perspective. We put together a note that summarized this conversation. We sent it to town manager last Friday, and I sent it to all of you earlier today. I'd like to read a single sentence from this report because I think it captures the key points for why we are recommending this particular item as the most important item in the list. The EDC believes the planning and advancement of sewers along Great Road Commercial Corridor holds the greatest promise for revitalizing existing businesses and will set the stage for broader economic development and expansion for the town into the future. I thank you for the opportunity for us to give you our opinion, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Colin User. Tara.
Can you hear me?
Yes, good.
Yes. Yes, and so I would like to, I agree with what Jason said, but with a slight twist. I agree that the idea of investing in stuff that we're already going to do is really important. In that, I would like very much to see seed money for a rehab trust, as opposed to constructing new units. And I would like to see the social worker. I think it's a time that we need to start investing in. So we've allowed all this growth. We have all these people, and we need help. And the pandemic is the pandemic made it even worse for people. Mental health illnesses, and as we can see, the police issues that we've had around the country, these types of things, the social work is going to prevent us from having even bigger issues, as opposed to what can happen if you don't have treatment of people that are struggling with these issues. So I think that a $400,000 study for sewer expansion is outrageous. I think that I'm very much against that. Before you start talking about growth, I think you should address water, whether you have enough water for expansions and to accommodate more buildings. And that's it. Thank you very much. Oh, a community center, of course, that we need a community center, and that would be a great investment in our healing. And so I also want to make a question, because I didn't see something on the list here, which is more rent relief and more small business relief, because the small businesses, especially in West Acton, are struggling, and a lot of people are still struggling. There is going to be an eviction tsunami, as this starts to take hold. And I think that we need to do more for folks that are struggling with rent. So I guess that's a question that turned into a comment, but are we allowed, is the ARPA money allowed to be used for small business relief and rent relief?
So P35 is to appropriate $300,000 for rental assistance, which is rent relief, I believe, what you're referring to. And there are several items in here related to helping businesses. P17 is for forgivable loans to help businesses reinvest in their HVAC systems. But to answer your question, yes, I do believe that providing business assistance is an eligible use.
Can I just say?
Thank you. I think that my point is I think the businesses need the help now, not some future expansion study that maybe it'll trickle down later. I feel like that doing what Jason said, doing the things that we already had on the list, and providing people direct relief. Thank you.
Melissa Nickel.
Good evening, this is Alyssa Nickel on School Street. I do have a couple of questions and concerns before I share my comments with you. I acknowledge that a complete proposal with a lot of detail is not possible here. But the lack of detail in some of the items does make it a little bit difficult to prioritize. One example would be the Asa Parlin House. That $1 million is about 15% of 7 million. That's a lot, a big chunk. And I realize that it's a historic building, but it's just not clear to me what exactly is included. So I understand the concept and I'm supportive of it. I understand what will be there, but just the price tag is a little mystifying.
So I assume that you've seen the various
that have been put forward for the Asa Parlin House, is that correct?
Yes.
So it's to implement one of those proposals.
Okay, so that's just the price tag.
Mr. Manager.
Yes, thank you. So historic preservation is much more expensive than regular construction. So the building improvements themselves would be several hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, but this would also include work to the exterior and surrounding infrastructure needed to support a community space and connect it to the rest of the complex. So it's walkways, it's things like that related to making it part of the municipal complex.
Okay, thank you. Is it correct that I might be reading the category incorrectly, revenue replacement? It doesn't seem that these, all these first 8 items are projects that have already been funded. So I'm not really sure why some of these are in revenue replacement. I understand receipt shortfalls, but projects that have not yet been funded, why would they be in this category?
Thank you. That's a good question. So we're working with the ARPA consultant to help us. Interim final rule that was issued by the federal government, and included in that is language that states that while revenue replacement is, a good example would be P1 where you're backfilling revenue shortfalls. Other examples are funding programs directly where tax revenue where revenues would have been able to fund them. So it's a little bit less restrictive than the other categories, which are specifically targeting different areas of need. Revenue replacement is an area where we would be able to do things that aren't directly related to any of the other categories.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. I just have one last question before I make some comments, if I may. Some items appear to have already been funded. One example would be the tents, tables, chairs for the return to school in April, the community food program from March to June. So are these funds, if these are funded, this is going back into a budget that has already been spent?
So this funding can be used for items anything on through December of 2024. So items that were already, things that were already incurred, this would be a potential way to cover those costs as long as it wasn't before March of this year.
Okay. So I guess my comments are in agreement with Mr. Cole as far as prioritizing the projects. First, revenue replacement, supporting the projects that are going to have an impact, a positive impact on either programs or people or businesses that have been negatively impacted, rather than new projects and programs that would be a lower priority. So I'm in support of most of the projects in the categories addressing negative economic impacts, supporting public health, and equity-focused services. Because, you know, this is emergency relief, it's rescue. So I think that the board would be well advised to focus on those uses, even though other uses are allowed. I am opposed to a couple of the project items. I am opposed to using the funds for construction of affordable housing, but I'm fully in support of using those funds to rehabilitate affordable housing. If we're going to be true to our commitment to climate change resiliency and sustainability, we need to focus on rehab rather than new construction. I'm also adamantly opposed to the sewer feasibility study and also the sewer expansion to the Acton Housing Authority project. I attended the ZBA hearing last week. The project has high aims to be net zero, and sewer would significantly undermine the ability for that to be a passive building because it's so energy intensive. They already have a plan and they have space for a septic. It's already been budgeted. So I know that there is some concern about the height of the mound, but I'd much rather see a switchback pathway leading down to the dog park, and hopefully they can sort of grade and smooth that in a nice way. But we don't need to spend a third of our available funds to go across Route 2, expanding the sewer district. I'm a little mystified why folks think that expanding sewer along Great Road would be a big boon to the businesses that are currently there. And I think that we need to be supporting the businesses and the people who are here in town first. I shop a lot on Great Road, and I think about the grocery stores there, the office supply store, there are carpeting stores, art galleries, Acton Art, the Handworks Gallery, there's a liquor store, there are churches on that road, Acton Concord Chabad and High Rock Covenant, car dealerships, doggy daycares and vets, eye doctors. Those folks are not going to be able to afford sewer betterment, and they're not going to be served by sewers. So I think that it would be a shame if that much money was spent on sewer feasibility. We saw in West Acton that most of the businesses were not in support, other than a few tenants of West Acton Village Works. It's incredibly expensive, the sewer betterment, and also the sewer fees that you are saddled with once you hook up to sewer. And I think that's about it. So thank you for taking the time to listen, and I look forward to filling out the survey and sending in an email with the numbers of the specific projects that I'm supportive of.
Thank you.
Erica, Amir Lynn.
Yes, hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Erica Amir Lynn, and I live on Old Stonebrook in Acton, and tonight I'm speaking in my capacity as the president of the board of the NAGOG treatment facility known as NTF. Our facility is located on Durkee Lane in North Acton, and we serve several thousand people per day. NTF provides wastewater service to multiple residential neighborhoods, including the entirety of the village of Nagog Woods, the condominiums on Beth Circle and Aspen Lane, single-family homes on Henley Road and Nonset Path, and the Acton Housing Authority property on Sachem Way. Our commercial customers include the Nagog Park Mall, all of Nagog Park Drive Office Park, including Insulet, and the former Video Signals Plaza on Great Road. We were formerly a privately owned treatment plant, which was poorly run, had very high rates, and was in near constant violation of Massachusetts DEP rules. In 2016, the town of Acton was offered the opportunity to purchase the plant, but declined. Subsequently, the plant and our entire collection system, including all of the piping and the pumping stations, were purchased by the Nagog Woods Condo Corporation for $1. This plan is overseen by a separate not-for-profit LLC and governed by a 5-member board composed of representatives from its user base. Since we purchased the plant in 2016, we have been upgrading steadily and repairing the exceedingly long list of deferred maintenance items that we inherited. We have to date spent $549,000 on capital repairs on the plant, entirely funded by our ratepayers. As we are a not-for-profit publicly owned facility, any excess revenue at the end of the year goes directly back into facility upgrades. During the COVID-19 pandemic, most of Nagog Park and Nagog Mall were shut down for extended periods of time, including the restaurants. Subsequently, our commercial revenues dropped precipitously. Compared to 2019, our commercial revenue in 2020 was down 35%. Additionally, the first 2 quarters of 2021, commercial revenue has also been below our revised forecast. Adding to this difficulty, we are in year 2 of a 4-year plant upgrade plan required and approved by Mass DEP. We have multiple large infrastructure upgrades ahead of us, which must be completed in the next 2 years, but cost beyond what our current reserve fund can support because of the shortfalls of the commercial revenue. We have $250,000 of work that has been scoped and priced and contractors selected. This work is shovel ready. It cannot be delayed or deferred. NTF has chosen to borrow money for the first time in order to complete these projects. As we are completely user supported, repayment of this loan is borne by all of the users, including commercial users, over a period of several years. We expect rates will rise. ARPA money would make a transformative change in the financial outlook for our users. It would allow us additional time to recover from the revenue impact of COVID-19 shutdowns as the reoccupying of Nagog Park is proceeding slowly. NTF exists in funding purgatory. We are not a municipal entity and we are not eligible for state revolving fund money or US EPA money. Other government funding mechanisms are not available because we are either too small or too large. Until this point, there has been no source of outside grant money we were able to access to mitigate the effects of COVID-19. It is easy to forget that vital wastewater infrastructure is located at the far end of North Acton, but we are essential to life, health, and economic activity in town. There are no other options for wastewater treatment for the businesses and residences served by the plant. New business will not want to move into the vacant spaces in Nagog Park if the plant cannot meet their wastewater needs. An investment in NTF is in line with the goals of the Select Board, and we respectfully ask for $300,000 in ARPA funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry Rosen.
Folks, I'm speaking on behalf of the Acton Water District, and I would like to share my screen with you to briefly explain why we would like to remove one item from the list and add a different item that will have very high impact to the town of Acton.
Barry, how long will this presentation take?
I can do it. I can probably do it in about 10 minutes. I will move quickly and then let you ask questions, which I think you will probably have after this.
Okay.
Because it's very high impact to the town, as you will see at the end.
Okay, I would love it if it's a little shorter than that, if that's possible, but I'll let you go ahead and present. So Mark, if you could. Oh, sorry.
Okay, let me unmute. And okay. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Board of Selectmen. I'm going to focus, well, let me make one remark first. It looks like there was $100K allocated for a Kelly's Corner request, and we ask that that can be removed as it, we will find another way to fund Kelly's Corner by deferring maintenance on the water mains for 2 to 3 years. We will provide $500,000 a year of deferred maintenance and apply it to Kelly's Corner. However, I will probably readdress the selectmen to explain the full story about that another time. Today, I want to focus on the North Acton Water Treatment Plant, which services 5 wells. The impact to the town of Acton is that without that plant functioning, we are losing 350 gallons a minute of water that is not being produced for the town of Acton. Out of necessity, as I said, we're going to postpone the 100K allocated to Kelly's Corner. We would like that provided to this presentation of a Pfas mitigation funding request. As you probably know, the North Acton wells and the North Acton plant are intermittently, very intermittently online, depending upon the testing of Pfas at that site. The wells have been fluctuating, unexplained for perhaps. They have tested very low, down 16, 17 parts per trillion, all the way up to 80 parts per trillion in some measurements, well above what the state allows. Some very quick PFAS facts, and they're going to be quick. You can ask questions about them later. These substances are essentially fluorine-based substances, fluorocarbons essentially, that were man-made, and they began appearing around the 50s. We are watching some of them being phased out. Unfortunately, new ones called short chain PFAS are arriving. Some of them are very difficult to detect. In fact, there is a plant in New Jersey that is foreign owned. They are engineered in a European country. They're being manufactured in New Jersey. The state of New Jersey is trying to fight it, but because they're inventing them so quickly, it is difficult to test for them. They have to keep inventing new tests. Because of the manufacture and distribution, they are now found in the air, the water, soil. The FDA still permits PFAS in food wrapping, in women's cosmetics wrapping, in non-stick carpets and treatments. They even until recently were found in coatings applied to solar panels to shed the water. There are a lot of things, but we won't go into them. They unfortunately are sometimes called forever chemicals. They stay in animals and people a long time. The health risks and the amount of exposure to cause these health risks is still being researched, and it's still a debatable topic. There is a federal guideline only. It is not regulated by the federal government in any shape, fashion, and because of that, the federal government makes no monies for mitigation available for PFAS. The state of Massachusetts has taken a fairly aggressive posture, and the Massachusetts MCL, which is the maximum contaminant level permitted in the state of Massachusetts for the total of 6 of these long-chain PFAS substances, is 20 nanograms per liter. Another way of saying that is 20 parts per trillion. Give you some idea of what that means. 20 nanograms per liter is equivalent to 20 drops into 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The Acton Water District is trying its best to address the problem today. We have formed a Acton Water District PFAS study group, which consists of the district manager, a commissioner, the environmental manager, the town sustainability manager, and the town of Acton assistant town manager. They meet on a regular basis, and they are making recommendations, and in a moment, I'll give you one of the recommendations. They are also going to be making a field trip to the town of Hudson to see how Hudson is dealing with PFAS. Testing is challenging. We do monthly testing. We have never, ever measured this low. Parts per million was the common. Parts per billion has become fairly common. This is the first thing that's ever been measured in parts per trillion. Testing is very, very expensive. We are also limited to a few labs that the state of Massachusetts has certified. And because of that, there are very few places to go. Obviously, the testing is quite expensive. We have also made sure that all the testing results are transparent. We post all the results of the testing. We make sure the public is always aware of them. In fact, their next bill, they'll see some information on PFAS inserted into their next water bill. But we are very transparent. We know it's a serious problem. One of the recommendations that we have begun implementing is a bottled water program that is available to residents of the town who are pregnant, nursing, immunocompromised, or they have infants in the house, in the home, in the home. We have applied to the state for there's very limited PFAS money available. We have applied to the state for some monies to provide funding, continued funding to this program, as we've told the people in the agreement they signed with the water district, that this program of rebating their cost of bottled water for those affected individuals will end when the funds run out. We have asked the state for another $150,000 to continue this program. We do not know how long it's going to go. We have applied to the state and received aid for a mitigation solution, that is to develop and fund a PFAS pilot mitigation solution for the North Acton water treatment plant. We did receive that money. We have run the testing and have found a solution that could work. We fully expect the regulations to continually evolve in the state. We expect them to lower the MCL, the maximum contaminant level. We fully expect they will probably include the newer, shorter chain PFAS substances so that the current regulations will become tighter and tighter. We've looked at perhaps renting a solution, which we can implement very quickly, could be installed in trailers. However, over the long haul, it's much more expensive. The solution that we did find, as you can see, involves using activated GAC, granulated activated charcoal. We add to that something for the future because we know the regulations will change, ion exchange. We're looking for a solution that'll be appropriate for the town now and into the future as the regulations tighten. One of the things that it appears we will have to do, not appears, we know we'll now have to do, because we'll need to run the solution around the clock all year long, includes an added heated building, since the solutions have to be kept above freezing. So it looks like we'll have to build, in addition to the treatment plant that exists, that'll probably be about 36 by 36, we believe. We did test, the study did attempt permutations of 4 different solutions by 2 different vendors, and we had the testing administered by a neutral third party called Blue Leaf Incorporated. The postponement of implementing the solution will increase the costs, and it will decrease the available options for us, as there are a limited number of construction vendors in the water that can construct water treatment plants that are limited, as we've already discovered with our last plant. And then we found out all of them are very, very busy. No federal programs are available that we could discover. State program is minimal, and it's designed to support studies, as we've done, and engineering/design, not the construction or the operations. As you see above, the estimated cost is between 5.5 and 6 million for North Acton. It will probably be on the higher end because the DEP, which approved, as I'll get to, the DEP has already asked us to make some minor changes to the plan to give it some additional flexibility, which obviously we're going to make. We are requesting $2 million to help fund this. It is a big ask, but it is a big ask town problem. The commissioners like you live here in the community. We drink the same water as 98% of us that are living here. Why should you think about supporting this? PFAS is a community-wide issue. We hear about it at our commissioners' meetings, as well as from residents that send us email and see us around. It is the issue that is raised consistently during the public comments section of our meetings, and it is the item that consistently appears on each agenda, as it should. The effects on a person's health are still being researched and discussed at both the state and federal levels. Massachusetts has adopted a regulation substantially below the federal guideline, and there are ongoing discussions at the state level as to whether and how these regulations should be adjusted. We are in the process of trying to get the new wells permitted, which require the new wells in Central Acton, as you know, requires additional money expenditures. For example, testing is required, and the DEP is going to require us to acquire additional land. We have already spent, as of our June 2021 financial audit, $10 million just on Central Acton plant. At the annual Acton Water District meeting, the voters appropriated another $1 million to allow us to try to get Assabet number 3 online to try to alleviate some of the water shortages that we're having. Watering, as you know, is currently restricted. We may need to implement a total ban on outdoor water use. That was just discussed again on our last Wednesday morning's meeting. We are also now considering a moratorium on new water connections. That has many implications, as you know, for development, implications to business, to real estate values. Any questions? Made it as short as I could.
Thank you.
Entertain a few questions, but this is not normally for back and forth. So, but this is a big presentation. So, any questions from members of the board? No questions here, Barry. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. That's a very, very good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I don't think there are any more people who want to give input. Is that right? Okay. I think at our next meeting, I'll give us a chance to have a little pre-discussion here in just a minute, if we would like. At our next meeting, we want to be prepared to ask the town manager to produce a proposal that we'll consider at the meeting at the following, right? So to do that, I think we need to be prepared at our next meeting to come in and choose a set of items that's less than the ARPA money, right? So I would like it if everybody would on the board would come in with a list of things that's less than $7 million. I mean, we can't each start with something that's more than $7 million. There's almost no point in the exercise. And then from that, we're still going to, because obviously we're not going to overlap by a large extent. So we'll still have to pare down the union of all of our lists. So, but we can get an idea when we go over the list whether it's supported by one of us or 4 of us, or whatever the numbers are, so we can get an idea where our priorities are. Also at our next meeting, we'll have probably more, or before our next meeting, we'll probably have more input as well. I expect the FinCom will be discussing this at their next meeting on the 28th, is it? So next Tuesday, a week from tomorrow. And we also may have more information from the school district, and we can ask, more information from any requester, including the water district that we heard tonight. So, if people would like more information, we can arrange to have presenters or that information prepared, and sent around. Preliminary discussion. Jim.
Either before this preliminary discussion or right after. I know this is the time of night in a long meeting where it'd be really good for me to clear my head, take a few minutes away. So if there's a time that you could suggest a short break, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Can we do it right after the preliminary discussion, and then we'll take a 5-minute break? Any comments on what we've heard, or anything people would like to say about preparing for a preliminary decision next time? Dean.
Yeah, well, I think certainly the PFAS issue from the water district was not on my radar screen. I knew there was a problem. I didn't really think that this might provide a solution, but kind of the couple of things that I look at that I would prioritize would be things that are not of a recurring nature. So I agree that, we don't want to start hiring a lot of new staff with this money, because eventually it'll go on the tax base. I'm the infrastructure guy, bricks and mortar, so I favor all of those. And I think it's important that we look at what can we do that's going to benefit the most people. And certainly I was intrigued by Barry's presentation, with 98% of the town being serviced through water provided by the Acton Water District. So I think that kind of moves that, from not being on the list at all, it moves it up into a more prominent position. So I hope that for our next meeting, the manager, the town manager and the water district manager can get together and sort of flesh this out a bit, because that's a significant project. So I would certainly, that those kind of infrastructure projects like water or the sewer expansion, certainly to the Acton Housing Authority, I think is an important aspect as well, because that's certainly going to benefit the operation of the Housing Authority, plus it has a lot of collateral benefits for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Imogen?
Thank you. I actually wanted to elaborate on Barry's presentation today. Thank you, Barry. The Acton Water District, so I am the liaison to them this year, and the PFAS issue has been of significant concern to them because at this point, 2 of our North Acton wells are over 30 parts per trillion. We can't use that water. We're right now relying on other wells that we were hoping to save for future use. And so it's one of those situations where, an investment this size is big, but in my opinion, I think it does require thorough thought, and I think that we should seriously consider using our ARPA fund for it. And exactly like Barry said, in terms of the importance of projects and kind of reallocating money around, it would be best to take that $100,000 that we had allocated towards Kelly's Corner, put it into this PFAS project, and then add more in order to be able to get started on remediation. So I just wanted to voice my support for that, and also for Erica as well. $300K to help provide support to NTF, I think would be key. And then in terms of the other important things that we should consider, I think that, there have been a lot of good points discussed. It'll be hard to narrow it down. I gravitate towards, like people have said, supporting the public health response, the equity-focused services, just because, we have a lot of potential to do a lot of good in this town with this ARPA fund. And I think that thinking about, where the most need is in our town, what COVID has disrupted, and the ways that we can allocate funds in order to kind of rebuild the fabric of our town, I think is key. So that's just my 2 cents. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else want to make any comments or make any requests for information? Jim?
So starting from the general principles that have been said by more than one person about, I agree with those principles about, let's maintain what we have, let's finish projects we're in the middle of, and let's deal with the issues that have the most impact on public health and public well-being right away. That still leaves a lot of room for figuring out what that means. I think that an investment in the PFAS treatment makes sense. Obviously, that's an amount of money that we could discuss. I mean, they're looking for major help. If the major help was $2 million, that would be very helpful. If the major help was $1 million, that would also be helpful. Not as much, but certainly helpful. So there's some flexibility in how much money goes there. Although each dollar we take away is potentially extra money that is just going to end up in the bills of the 98% of people that get water through the water district. The other issue that I heard back and forth a lot was about the 2 sewer projects, not the NTF project, which seems like just a simple yes in my mind, that it's infrastructure that is otherwise unfundable, that impacts both residences and businesses in North Acton. That seems straightforward. I think the interesting discussions have been about the bringing the sewers over Route 2 to get to the Main Street project and the feasibility for Great Road. For me, the feasibility study, the place that I'd want to get to first is let's get a very rough ballpark estimate of the betterment. Because if it's going to be as ridiculously high as it was for Acton, we don't even need to go any further. We don't want to put the non-water using, the businesses that don't need a lot of extra sewer, we don't want to, add extra burden onto them, because that would hurt businesses rather than help them. So if we do a study, I'd like it to focus on the financial modeling. And the sewer connection to the Main Street project, this confuses me for the same reasons that were articulated already, which is that there is already room in that land for a septic system. It's part of their funding model that they can pay for it. They would not get funding from their funders for betterment fees and the extra operating cost. So I don't see us as an advantage to the AHA. I would like to, piece of information I'd like to get is to hear directly from the Housing Authority about whether, they see this as an advantage or a disadvantage, and in what ways. Yeah, because the alternative way of thinking of it is that it's basically it's a down payment on sewering, all the way up 27 to get to Great Road, and that's a huge policy question that we have not discussed at all here in any substantial way, and there's clearly big pros and cons on that. So throwing a little bit of recovery money at that seems to bypass the policy discussion we need to have first.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually agree with a couple of things you said there. I agree that the feasibility study for Great Road, we really need to understand how the finances might work. And there are a number of things that could happen, but that's the key. I believe. And I also agree, maybe I would say it a little bit differently. I would agree that the sewering of Great Road is more important than crossing Route 2. 8 to 10 empty storefronts. We know that from some of the landlords of the plazas that they have businesses like restaurants that they could rent to, but they can't rent to because there's not the water handling capacity. We also know that some of the plazas may not survive a septic system failure. I think that's more important in my mind. But I completely agree that we need to figure out how the monies would work. Other things. Okay, we'll then take a 5-minute break. Just allow people to clear their heads, and we'll be back at 9:30. Item 6 is an item that we decided not to do last time, waiting for thoughts from the Finance Committee. And the Finance Committee considered it at their meeting last week and voted to endorse the use of the ARPA funds as revenue replacement for the loss of local receipts last year. So there's a sample motion here which I can read at the time, but I'd like to just have maybe first the town manager could tell us about this again, and then we can decide if we want to support this, because it allows the finance department to do some planning if we do this. So, Mr. Manager, maybe if you can explain the
Sure. Thank you. So, at the end of the planning for the fiscal year 22 budget, it became clear that we were not going to hit our target for local receipts in FY21. And so it turns out Steve Barrett issued his year-end report recently, and we were around $400,000 short in the area of local receipts, which wasn't a problem for us operationally. We were still able to deliver all the services in town. We were able to do that by reducing expenses significantly to make sure that we had enough revenue available. So no issue in 21, but where the issue comes in is in 22, which is the current fiscal year, when the DOR checks our financial plan for the year. They will look at the revenues that we brought in last year and say, hey, wait a minute, you're budgeting level for this year too, but you didn't hit your target last year, so where are you going to get that extra revenue? And they're going to make us readjust our financial plan, which would require us there is currently excess levy capacity, which we would have to utilize to meet that revenue requirement. So the recommendation from the Finance Department, and for me, I guess, would be to use ARPA funds, which is one of the intended uses, is to backfill revenue shortfalls to allow us to shore up our 22 revenues and not have that issue, as I mentioned. And the Finance Committee had a good discussion about it last week, and they strongly, I believe the motion was strongly recommend that the board consider taking this step and using ARPA funding for this purpose.
Any questions or discussions by the board?
If you've got a cool motion all written up, I'd be happy to hear it.
So I would take a motion that the Select Board endorse the use of $400,000 in ARPA funds to replace the shortfall in estimated local receipts revenue in the fiscal year 22 budget.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll vote. All in favor of the motion as read, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
COVID-19 updates, Mr. Manager.
Nothing much to report here other than we're continuing to monitor where we are with public health trends, working closely. We have weekly COVID response team meetings just to make sure we're on the same page. We're trying to encourage our employees to take advantage of the employee vaccine testing program. We have a testing program, and we've opened it up and encourage people to utilize that. And, we're working with the state and our local partners to make sure everyone's safe. The current case number was in the teens last week, and I believe we are not far from there right now. But nothing, the Board of Health isn't meeting this week, but I believe they'll meet again next week. The current cases as of September 20th are 11. Which brings the total cases that we've had under documentation of since the start of this thing is 1,104 cases in the community, but 11 of those currently. So yeah, we're communicating with businesses and the public, and it's going as well as it could be, given what we're all dealing with.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, weren't we higher than that a few weeks ago? Didn't we get above 20 at some point?
We did.
Okay, so that's good. I'm glad we're coming back down.
Yeah, we peaked in this fall, in the beginning of September, we had 28 cases.
Yeah.
And now we're down to 11.
Yeah, that's great. Because when I saw the numbers go up that high, I thought, oh, this could be the beginning of a really bad fall. So it's great to hear it, see it go back down. Thank you.
Okay. Item number 8, approve intermunicipal agreement for temporary health inspection support for the town of Maynard.
Our friends in Maynard are looking for some support for, I think it's a month or 6 weeks. They just received approval from their board or their town meeting to hire a full-time inspector, but they're not on board yet, and so they're looking for some help. We are fortunately full-staffed now in our health division, and we actually think it's a good opportunity to help with the training of our newest employees. So we think it'd be a win-win for us. So I just wanted to make sure that the board supports it before we move forward for this temporary intermunicipal agreement with the town of Maynard.
Would this be for like a month, 2 months, or do we have a timeline?
Yeah, it's supposed to be for 4 to 6 weeks. That's the plan.
And the health director sent around a letter saying that she can accommodate this effort. And correct me if I'm wrong, the town of Maynard will reimburse us for these?
Yes, they will pay us. I think we're going to help them about 6 hours a week or 6 to 8 hours a week, and they would cover that time.
And is there a particular language that I need to read for this?
I think a motion to the effect of authorizing the town manager to enter into an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Maynard to provide health inspection services on a temporary basis.
Does anyone want to make that motion? Okay. Does anybody want a second?
I second.
So Himija moves, Fran seconds. Any further discussion?
Can we have John make our motion?
Any comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll vote. All in favor of the motion as read, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aren't these voice votes cool? So it passes unanimously. Approve local initiative program regulatory agreement for 26 Carlisle Road.
This is a step in the process for affordable housing that Habitat has to take to move their project forward and work towards funding and everything else they need to do. This, if you recall, is a former tax possession property on Carlisle Road that the town has held for probably a decade or more, and it's in really bad shape. We did an RFP. Town meeting authorized us to sell it to the most responsive person, which was or most responsive entity, which was the Habitat, and they agreed to build an affordable housing unit on that property. They're just starting their pre-permitting, and this is just a part of the requirements for it being affordable. And it's something that the board, as its chief executive officers, has to sign, not me. So that's why I'm asking you to approve it.
Again, is there any specific language that we need?
Approve the local initiative program regulatory agreement for 26 Carlisle Road.
That's fairly straightforward. Before we do that, any comments or questions for the manager? Okay, I will take a motion with the wording that the manager suggests. Approve local initiative program regulatory agreement for 26 Carlisle Road. Anyone want to make that motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Dean moves and Fran seconds. Any further comment or from the public? Seeing none, we'll vote. All in favor of the motion as read, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We pass it unanimously. Indigenous Peoples Day discussion. So in our discussion last week, We talked about follow-up actions, and Himija, you said you would consider drafting a proclamation for us to consider, so maybe you can kick off our discussion.
Yeah, so I was able to talk with Jim and get his thoughts. I think that the best thing to do is, before we jump into making a declaration, kind of like we said before, I think taking our due diligence with it would be good, but at the same time, I think that it is important for us as a select board to recognize the 2nd October of Monday as Indigenous Peoples' Day, and then draft up the specific language over the course of the next couple months, working with different people in the community, and also reaching out to Indigenous organizations and compensating them for their time to hopefully give us more direction on our declaration. So I drafted up a statement that, would be ideal, in my opinion, for us to kind of vote on. So it says, the Acton Select Board recognizes the 2nd October and Monday as Indigenous Peoples' Day, and in accordance with the statement we voted for in favor of on September 13th, is dedicated to launching a process of consultation with Indigenous communities and Acton residents with the intent of preparing a formal declaration to make Indigenous Peoples' Day official in the town of Acton within the coming months. And so I felt like that was kind of the best of both the worlds, at least based on kind of the discussions I heard and also in conversation, but definitely wanted to open it up, and Jim, also to kind of hear your thoughts, because I know you were undecided. So would love to hear what people think about that.
Comments, questions from the board?
Sure. I was really happy to get your call, Himija, and to talk this through. A couple of thoughts. One is just to sort of remind the public and ourselves what we voted for last time. So just because we don't have draft minutes in front of us yet. So what we agreed to last time was that the Select Board declare that we are in favor of making the 2nd Monday in October Indigenous Peoples' Day, and that we launch a process of consultation with Indigenous communities and Acton residents with the intent of preparing a formal declaration during the upcoming year. So that's in line with what you just said. You made it a little more clear that, we're not just going to sort of think about this and then, maybe not do it, that we're actually, we're headed down a path. The kind of investigations that we might do, I would love to have help from someone on your staff, John, because we might want to, as Himija suggested, get some professional consulting help on being clear on the history, on what's happened in the past, what's happening currently, so that we can inform ourselves and the public about what's going on. And that's something we can't, a couple of select board members can't just go out and spend town money, it turns out, although that would be nice. The other thing that I guess I wanted to bring to people's attention was, one of the first places I looked was IndigenousPeoplesDayMA.org, which is the sort of the campaign center for Indigenous Peoples' Days declarations and campaigns in Massachusetts. And what I found interesting and important was that the very first thing they say after the title of their workshop is, please do not move forward with your own Indigenous Peoples' Day campaign without consulting with us first. Which I took as sort of a reinforcement of the notion that actually having an Indigenous Peoples' Day without consulting with Indigenous people is, that's a step in the wrong direction rather than a step in the right direction. So those are my thoughts.
Anyone else? Dean?
Yeah, I think certainly what Himija has come up with is certainly in compliance with what we discussed a week ago. I frankly, still think that we should make sure that we have lots of time for public comment. I've been contacted privately by a number of individuals that feel one way or another about this, and I think that it's important not only that we hear from Indigenous people, but we hear from everyone else. So I would be okay with the idea of voting in favor of the motion that Himija suggests, with the understanding that this is sort of a one-time interim step. We might end up making this a permanent thing, or we might decide after reflection. I was intrigued by the comment from the citizen earlier today about the UN having a specific day in August that is set as the International Indigenous Peoples Day. And I think that is probably worthwhile investigating. The reason behind the Columbus Day initially was to take notice of the vast number of immigrants that have moved into the country. In that particular instance, it was Italian immigrants, but I think that it's important that these other ethnic groups that have contributed so much to the country are not shortchanged in this whole process. So I'm okay with doing this as a one-shot, and I think we need a really robust discussion of it from the public and everyone else.
Okay, we'll get to the motion in just a second, but if the motion passes, and this doesn't have to be in the motion, but I would like us to select one of us to drive this, because I think so that we don't operate in cross purposes and we can't meet outside of a public meeting. So one of us should drive it and bring back any, follow-up decisions or anything else that needs to be done to the board. And I know Jim and Himija have been kind of the most, had the most to say about this so far. I don't know if one of you guys would want to drive this going forward.
I'm happy either way. I'm happy to drive it, and I'm also happy to have Jim drive it. I think that us working together in whatever capacity that looks like will be great for this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be great for Himija to take the lead on this, as our newest member, and as someone who is passionate about this, and as someone who is, ran on a campaign of increasing representation and increasing the diversity of the board and how we speak. I think it fits really well into, what you've already brought to the board.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
Himija, I would ask you to read your statement once again in the form of a motion, and then we'll see if someone will second.
Sure. I move that the Acton Select Board recognizes the 2nd October in Monday as Indigenous Peoples' Day, and in accordance with the statement we voted for in favor on September 13th, is dedicated to launching a process of consultation with Indigenous communities and Acton residents with the intent of preparing a formal declaration to make Indigenous Peoples' Day official in the town of Acton within the coming months.
Is there a second?
So I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? We heard some comments from the public at the beginning.
Manager.
Mr. Manager.
I just was wondering your expectation for staff involvement in the coming months, as indicated in the motion.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit on that, but we can definitely go back and forth on this because we don't want to put too much burden on our staff. So I think that what we were hoping for was actively reaching out to Indigenous communities and Acton residents, ideally hosting potentially a forum for people to discuss their thoughts about this, with the active reach out to Indigenous communities, finding people that we can consult with, and then in addition to that, potentially providing a consultation fee so that we aren't misusing labor or anything like that, and that we're doing our due diligence. So that's what we had in mind. And ideally, this would be a process that would happen over the next couple of months. And ideally, if we could have, this declaration that, had been thought out by the community and you know, had been informed by input from Indigenous communities. If we could have it to vote on by the end of the year, that would be great, in order for it to be kind of taken into effect for next year, but so that we're not waiting too long for that.
Thank you. That's helpful. I think this is a perfect project for the diversity officer position that I proposed in the FY22 budget, which we haven't moved forward on yet because we're waiting to make sure that it's consistent with the recommendations from the DEIC. And I would really appreciate, since there's not any expertise in that, and we can do anything with our staff, but I think it'd be better to have someone that has expertise in that. I wonder if the timeline can be pushed to next October, or, you know, in enough time in advance of the next Indigenous Peoples Day, so that rather than by the end of the year, which is 10 months from when it happens, if you allow for more time for the process, that we can get that new person in the mix to support the effort. And it'd be a good, you know, they have a lot of things that they'll have to do when they get on board, but it'd be good to have kind of a concrete scope of work for one thing like this.
Absolutely, yeah, we can work on the timeline for that, but I agree, I think this would be a great project for the diversity officer. Thank you.
So do you want to change your motion to say within some more months, and then have Jim re-second?
Sure, would we prefer within, I kept it as, I had it as the next couple months to keep it kind of broad and not super specific. Maybe,
Mr. Manager, would by the end of the fiscal year be okay with you?
Sure.
Thank you, okay.
And so if you're making that amendment?
Yes, I move to amend.
And Jim, will you re-second that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so now we have that, and now I'll take comments, and there are two first in the room. Charlie, please go ahead.
Hi, Charlie Cudlick, River Road. I think this is a great opportunity to do something that everybody talks about, which is to unify the town. If you go ahead, as you seem to be headed for, with some wording to indicate it's not done yet, but it's pretty clear where this board's going, that's not going to do it. There are many, many people in this town who have no idea that this is on the table. They just don't know about it. And if you go ahead and vote something, well-intentioned as it may be, is just one more thing that says, what's our elected select board doing? Who knows? I think there is some value, of course, as Your Majesty says, in indicating our, or some people's disapproval of Columbus and so on. But there could be many different opinions in this town that you have not heard. You are the select board. You are representing all of us, not just your own individual points of view. This is your opportunity to put something in front of the population of Acton, let them comment on it, let them think about it. There really is no tremendous urgency. You know, this situation as it has been existed for 300 years, I think we can wait another few months or a year. So I'm somewhat really more than concerned that if you get ahead of the population of Acton, it's just one more reason for this town to be divided. And after everybody's had a chance to say what they think, and I don't know what that is, I really don't. And then you vote, then at least people have a feeling that they had a chance to express their opinions, and that's very important. It has not been happening. So my request to you would be not to vote anything that already indicates where you headed, but to say, we're going to consider this. We want everybody in town to think about it, and we expect to take some action by, next May, next June, whatever the reasonable time is. That will be a positive step. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just note that Hemage's motion says that we're supposed to take into account, the opinions of town residents. Mark, could you go ahead, please?
Hi, this is Tara. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. I feel a sense of urgency on this, and I feel like instead the motion should be that you declare this October holiday to be Indigenous Peoples' Day, and that you will consider changing it back. So the school committee changed the mascot took the mascot away and said that was the end of it, and they weren't going to talk about it again. But I respect what Charlie says and the others have said about wanting to discuss. But on the other hand, this is not new. This has been around for a really long time, and pleading ignorance on an issue. If slavery was, we'll take some months to discuss it. Well, why not declare it now and then discuss it later? For me, it's much more of a sense of urgency than to wait on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and also I was going to mention this to me is I'm personally going to be on the next election. I'll be, for those who refuse to declare this, I think that's going to be something that the voters are going to want to know, that certain select board members decided to wait on this issue. Thank you. I respect that if the tribes here want you to wait, that's great, but you can declare it today with the details to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Alyssa Nickel.
Thank you. This is Alyssa Nickel in South Acton on School Street. I just want to thank the board for the vote that you took tonight. I do agree that there is a sense of urgency, as Ms. Nagaretti said last Monday. Every single year that goes by is 1 year too many, and Indigenous people in this country are continuously facing erasure, cultural erasure. They're not represented they're not represented. I also wanted to reply or comment on the notion that people need a chance to speak. As Mr. Martin just pointed out, this process does incorporate public comment, but I'd like to challenge the idea that no one is aware or not enough people are aware. There are thousands of school families who look at the school calendar. The Acton-Boxborough School District calendar already notes the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples' Day rather than Columbus Day. So that's a whole lot of awareness. Ms. Vieira said earlier that our voter turnout is only 10%. I feel like people are aware if they are showing up to select board meetings and reading town news flash updates and visiting social media. So I think that there is a lot of awareness that this is happening. I know the select board has already received emails. And if people want to comment, they just need to show up and pay attention to what's going on. They don't need their hands held. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that's all the commenters.
We'll go ahead and vote. Oh, sorry, go ahead, please, Dean.
Yeah, could I just ask Hemager to reread the motion, considering we made a few changes or?
Yeah, sure. So this is the motion as I have it. The Acton Select Board recognizes the second October and Monday as Indigenous Peoples' Day, and in accordance with the statement we voted for in favor on September 13th, is dedicated to launching a process of consultation with Indigenous communities and Acton residents, with the intent of preparing a formal declaration to make Indigenous Peoples' Day official in the town of Acton by the end of the fiscal year. Oh, yes, second Monday in October. My apologies.
Okay. Any other comments before we vote?
Sure. Just a couple little things. The Indigenous Peoples' Day website pointed me towards Italians for Indigenous Peoples' Day, and points out that in Massachusetts, October is officially recognized as Italian American Heritage Month. And there's lots of opportunities for festivals, for going to communities that, are largely still Italian, and, enjoying the fine food of Italy. And I'm not concerned that removing Columbus Day will reduce our opportunity to celebrate Italian culture.
Thank you.
And not to throw in a monkey wrench, but even though I agree, I want to have this happen for the town of Acton, I want it done much sooner. And I was hoping that we could all come together and agree that and declare this October 11th as Indigenous Peoples' Day. We all saw what played out when the mascot was retired. I feel like we'll all see this revisit. I think it will cause more divisiveness in the town. I think it's positive. I don't think we need more reasons or to consult Indigenous people to name, reimagine Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples' Day. I feel like that the Board of Selectmen struggled with this around creating the statement on racism, and I think, to me, it feels like we're revisiting that same thing. So I had to speak.
I understand. Do you object to going forward with the vote, or we've been made and seconded?
I know that no, I was not wanting to. I'm all for it moving forward. I'm just impatient that it will take so long.
Mm-hmm. Imogen, please.
Jim, do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'll be brief. I definitely hear what you say, Fran, and I think that it's one of those things, and Alyssa said this as well, every single year that we postpone this, we're doing more harm to a community that's already been harmed for hundreds of years. And so there's a huge sense of urgency. The reason why I worded it the way in terms of, us recognizing Indigenous Peoples' Day, as the second Monday in October, is because, I felt it was the best way to build consensus, and so that way moving forward, once we have a formal declaration, we can kind of build some traction. But I think that, I agree with you. I think that, the sooner we can do this, the better, and I think that it's important for us to recognize Indigenous Peoples' Day because it's, it's something we should have done a really long time ago, and it's something that is being brought to the table now. And in many ways, it's very late, but, we have to keep bringing this up, and we have to keep putting it on the agenda because it's really important.
Jim, did you have something else?
No, I think Kim had just said it.
Okay. Oh, Dean, please.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate what Fran has said, and Imogen and Jim and everyone here. I think it's important that we do this right rather than do this fast. And I think to hark back to what Charlie has suggested, it's important that we have unity in the community. And I think the way you build unity is you you have an education process, you let people understand this, you let people have their say, and then we make a decision based on not only our own feelings, but the feelings of the folks that elected us. And frankly, what caused tremendous amounts of disunity was this whole debacle with the Colonial mascot, because you had a board that just decided to move ahead on their own prejudices rather than listen to the entire public who basically pays the taxes and votes. So I'm comfortable with voting for the motion that Heminger has suggested, and I think it's a good step. And I'm fully aware that I'm going to get beaten by the right and beaten by the left, but that's part of the job.
So I'm in favor of the motion, but I also think that's a little unfair about the school committee, frankly. The school committee had a 6-week process where they got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces of input. I think we can hardly say that they made an ill-informed decision. I think it was a very informed decision. So I mean, I think the people who disagree with it say that it was a bad decision, a bad process. But they had 6 weeks to make their decision. You can go count the responses. I don't know what to say. There are hundreds of them. I read them all, actually. So anyway, I think it's a little unfair to the school committee to say that they didn't have a good process. So we can go forward with the vote. All in favor of the motion is red, say aye.
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 Any opposed? It passes unanimously. And I will take a motion to adjourn.
I'm still having, this is such a great conversation, I wish it could go on, but I know we will talk about this again, because that's part of what the consultation means. So I look forward to that. Move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Okay, Jim moves and Heminger seconds. It's not a discussable motion. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Any opposed? We're adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mark and John. Thank you, Charlie.